millionaire rejected by all, but finds incredibly inspiring love with single mom delivery driver. James paced the sidewalk of a forgotten neighborhood, his tailored suit suddenly out of place amongst the faded mailboxes and cracked pavement. The uproar he once dominated had turned into a dull hum, the kind of background noise you tuned out as you fiddled with your phone, searching for distractions to block the echoes of a life that slipped away. His heart felt like an anchor, weighing down on thoughts of rejection from those whose opinions had once guided his every move. He had tumbled from lofty heights, a self-made millionaire brought low by betrayal, and the resolute choice to toss aside his superficial friendships had since left him swimming in loneliness. Was it possible to retain dignity in a town where he was once the star? Every evening, while waiting on takeout orders, he caught sight of Clara, a delivery driver hustling on a bicycle packed full of meals, a determined look in her eyes. The juxtaposition was stark. She poured her soul into her work, racing against the clock, torn between her aspirations and the endless cycle of sleepless nights. Their exchanges were brief. She often shared snippets about her days, words rolling off her tongue like the shimmer of frosting on the sweets she yearned to create. Each time she spoke, James felt an unfamiliar warmth beneath his calloused heart, a peculiar stirring that questioned the value of his wealth. Her reality was a world away, yet the contradiction held a raw beauty he couldn't ignore. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as vulnerability flickered in the space between them, it was shattered by the weight of James's past. Countless nights spent surrounded by laughter and toasts with friends morphed into ghosts. Now all eyes averted from him. Whispers followed like shadows. Could he truly shed the gilded armor that once served as his shield? As Clara opened up about her struggles, James felt shame threaded through his thoughts. He was an outsider now, craving acceptance in a landscape that had once reverberated with applause for his success. Was he allowed to crave deeper connections when his world had imploded? He hesitated, his heart racing, skirting the edges of despair and self-worth. As tension continued to mount, the strain of societal expectations pinched at the very fabric of his being. Would helping Clara with her newfound business bring light or dim the little spark he'd discovered? Each moment shared with her was draped in the possibility of guilt. What could he offer beyond money? But when he witnessed her struggling with an order gone awry, an impulsive urge surged through him, a fleeting desire to act, to be something more than a tarnished remnant of his old life. Little did he know, as he stepped closer to offer his assistance, that this act would lead them down an unpredictable path. James's hands trembled, wrestling with opportunity and jeopardy, teetering on the brink of an emotional abyss. In that instant, he sensed the gravitational pull of their destinies colliding. Would Clara welcome him into her chaotic world, or would he remain forever trapped in the hollow shell of his accomplishments? As he readied himself to bridge the chasm, an unexpected crisis loomed just ahead, a harbinger of challenges that might demand he choose. Between the approval he once yearned for, and a love that beckoned like a beacon through the dark, James gulped, the taste of stale air prickling at his throat as he stepped forward. Clara glanced up, surprise flickering in her tired eyes that mirrored the fatigue etched on her face. In that brief moment, three worlds collided. The weight of his past, the uncertainty of the present, and the tantalizing promise of a future that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Are you okay?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. A simple action, but one that seemed to draw them closer, as if she sensed the turmoil within him. "I think I can help," he said, the words spilling out before he could second-guess himself. Clara's brow furrowed, skepticism clouding her usually bright demeanor. "Help? With what?" "The order you were handling." He gestured toward the spill of boxes and containers littering the sidewalk, remnants of a chaotic evening. "I can take care of it, if you let me." An appraisal flickered across her features. Trust didn't come easily, especially not for someone like James who wore the scars of privilege. Yet he sensed the fatigue in her body language. She was weary, and together they could make this work, with him anchoring his actions in genuine intent rather than expectation. As they began to sort through the orders, James's heart raced not from apprehension but exhilaration. Each label he peeled off deepened his understanding of her small universe, revealing hints of the dreams she cradled close, yet concealed under the burden of survival. He discovered flavors of her life he had never known, loves lost, dreams deferred, and an unyielding urge to create something beautiful. "You know," he initiated cautiously, "I've always believed that success was measured in numbers, in wealth." A beat passed as he glanced up, searching for her response. "But what's success, really? It seems to be much more about the impact we leave behind." Clara stopped in her tracks, meeting his gaze with a mixture of surprise and contemplation. "You're different, James," she said softly. "You don't seem like the millionaire I thought you were." That struck a chord deep inside him. "Do you think I have to be that person?" His voice, hesitant yet filled with curiosity, was more demanding than he intended. "Maybe not, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You've lost a lot, haven't you?" There it was, the truth sitting heavily between them. "I've lost everything I thought mattered," he confessed, almost embarrassed for allowing himself to strip away his layers in that moment. "But I'm trying to figure out what really does." Clara's expression shifted, something in her eyes softening. "This city could use someone who wants to help others, not just make money. Maybe you could find out what you want to do." In that brief exchange, something began to blossom between them. Yet, as the rush of connection surged, shadows danced around the periphery of James's mind. This new bond came with stakes that terrified him. Could he truly embrace this chance to redefine himself without clinging to the crutches of his old life? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the nearby street where a scene began unfolding. James turned, the commotion jarring the intimacy they had just cultivated. A delivery truck collided with a parked car, metal crumpling with alarming rapidity, sending adrenaline coursing through him. Clara stood at his side, eyes wide, uncertainty flashing across her face. His instinct kicked in. The chaos beckoned like a soldier's call to arms. "Let's help," he said, almost instinctively, but a new voice echoed inside him. Was he ready to throw himself into another maelstrom? Or would this be the moment of reckoning that could either lift him or drown him further? The decision loomed over him like an eclipse. As he ran towards the scene, doubts clawed at him. Was he merely chasing shadows, or was he forging a new identity out of kindness? And behind him, Clara's cautious footsteps followed, mirroring the growing uncertainty in his heart. What awaited him in that moment of chaos would either solidify their bond or unravel all that had begun to feel real. The acrid scent of burning rubber mingled with the winter chill as James sprinted toward the wreck, adrenaline sharpening his senses. The clatter of metal met the horrified murmurs of bystanders lingering at the fringes, their expressions a blend of shock and apathy. He could see the crumpled forms of the vehicles, but what struck him most was the undeniable voice of responsibility whispering through the clamor in his mind. "This is your chance to be someone who matters." "Clara!" he called back, glancing over his shoulder. She hesitated but then surged forward beside him, fear and determination battling in her eyes. In these critical moments, James felt a flicker of clarity. The uncertainty drifting through him began to sharpen into focus. This was no longer just about constructing a new identity. It was about true action. As they approached the scene, he noted a small crowd forming. A woman was trapped inside the car, her face pale and eyes wide with panic. Loss and regret welled within him, but now those emotions fueled a new resolve. Clara grabbed his arm, a grounding force. "We need to call for help first," she urged, her voice steadying him. James nodded, realizing this was a moment where independent action wouldn't suffice. Coordination and teamwork would be their most potent allies. He assessed the damage quickly. No flames, just the glimmering shards of broken glass scattered across the pavement. "I'll check on her. You call 911, he decided without waiting for an answer. The instinct to act, to engage, overrode his previous hesitations. Clara moved to grab her phone, shaking slightly as she dialed. Meanwhile, James crouched beside the driver's side window, his heart pounding as he met the terrified gaze of the woman inside. "I'm here," he said softly, keeping his voice calm. "Help is on the way. Can you tell me your name?" "Emily," she gasped, tears spilling over as fear constricted her breathing. "I can't feel my legs." James kept his voice steady, searching her face for signs of comfort. "You're going to be okay, Emily. I need you to stay with me. Can you do that?" He focused on the present moment, drawing her attention away from panic. Seconds stretched and he felt Clara's gaze on them, a reminder of the bond they were forming, one rooted in empathy, starkly different from the superficial connections of his past life. He realized that it wasn't just love or attraction building between them. It was a shared purpose, one that pulled him deeper into this new version of himself he was gradually embracing. As Clara relayed details to the dispatcher, James used all of his focus to keep Emily calm, coaxing her with simple questions about her day before the crash. "Did you have a busy shift? I'll bet you have some great stories," he encouraged, weaving an illusion of safety around their immediate plight. Moments later, sirens wailed closer, but James's mind cycled through echoes of doubt. Was he really forging a new identity, or was this all a performance? Something to distract from the reality that he was simply running away from his past. Yet, in the act of helping, he was beginning to reshape what success meant to him. As the paramedics arrived and took over, he felt Clara's hand brushing against his arm, a gentle gesture anchoring him. "You did great," she murmured, pride woven into her approval. A warmth blossomed within him at the compliment. It felt in sharp contrast to the coldness he had become accustomed to in his previous life. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to comprehend how meaningful little connections could be. But the deeper questions lay in wait, like shadows in the dark. Was he doing this for himself, or to gain Clara's approval? And what did that say about the person he wanted to become? As he turned to survey the scene, the weight of these revelations pressed on him, his past lingering like a specter as the future beckoned. What echoes would he hear when he faced those haunting memories again? Would he allow them to define him? Or would he use this experience to push ahead, forging an identity grounded in authenticity? The doubts hung over him as Clara's voice pulled him from his thoughts, urging him to turn back and face this new reality together. Yet James realized that every moment of clarity opened a new door to the unknown. He stood at the threshold of transformation, but would he choose to step through? James stood there, the sound of the sirens fading into the background as the paramedics swiftly moved into action. He felt an exhilarating blend of emotions, relief that help had arrived, and a lingering doubt about his motivations. Was this newfound sense of purpose real, or a fleeting illusion spurred by adrenaline? As Clara rejoined him, her eyes scanning the scene with a mix of concern and admiration, he caught her gaze and was struck by the intensity of their shared experience. "We did it," she said softly, still breathless. "You were amazing with her." Was I? Or did I just get lucky? He didn't mean to sound cynical, but the self-doubt crawled back. So much of his past had been spent trying to impress others, wearing masks to gain approval. It was like I was just playing a part. Clara frowned, searching his face. "James, you were genuinely there for that woman. You helped her when she needed it most. That's not playing a part. It's being real." But was it enough? He had taken action, that was true. Yet the doubts hovered, relentless. What part of him was still tethered to his former self? He was no longer that passive observer, yet he feared becoming too reactive, driven only by the need for validation. As they walked away from the scene, the cold air cut against his skin, sparking a rush of clarity. Maybe he had to confront the choices he had made, the motivations that took root within him. Just moments ago, he had stood at the brink of self-discovery. Now, a thick fog of his past clung to him, obscuring the potential of a future he wanted to grasp. "Let's get some coffee," Clara suggested, her tone brightening, breaking through his spiral of thoughts. They made their way to a nearby cafe, a small, inviting space filled with the rich aroma of brewing coffee and baked goods. As they settled into a booth, the warmth enveloped them, a stark contrast to the chill outside. James sipped his coffee, contemplating the bittersweet taste alongside the complexities of the day. "I've spent so much time feeling sorry for myself," he began, his voice low. "I wanted a fresh start, but it often feels like I'm running from something rather than toward something." Clara leaned in, her expression focused. "Running can be a way of escaping, but maybe it can also be a means of discovering who you want to be. You've shown you can act under pressure. That's a strength. Yeah, but what if I revert back? What if this sense of purpose is fleeting?" His heart raced as he pushed the thoughts out loud, exposing the rawness he kept hidden. "Then you face it again," Clara replied firmly. "Growth isn't linear, it's messy. You'll stumble, but the progress, the connection you're forming with yourself and with others, it's worth fighting for." James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Each moment spent with Clara revealed something deeper about himself, a nagging sense of worth he had long dismissed. Maybe he understood now that growth did not mean perfection, or even consistency. It meant grappling with the chaos within and around him, accepting his flaws while striving for something greater. "Have you ever thought about what you really want?" Clara asked, breaking into his thoughts again. Her eyes glinted with curiosity. He paused, a revelation dawning. "I want to stop being afraid of who I am," he admitted. "I want to embrace these moments of clarity, even when they challenge me." As Clara smiled, James felt a warmth blossom inside him. Yet he realized that acknowledging his vulnerability also opened him to potential failure. Would he have the strength to sustain this awareness in the face of his past? The realization made his heart race. The tension of uncertain growth still lingered. How might he face his unresolved fears? Before he could formulate a proper response, Clara's phone buzzed, drawing their attention. It was another reminder of the world outside their bubble, a world that would not wait for him to finish his introspection. What awaited him when they emerged from this cafe? What challenges loomed ahead that could test his resolve in unexpected ways? Just as a sense of determination began to form, the question struck him. What if the personal demons he thought he had left behind lurked closer than he anticipated? Would he be ready to confront them? The time for reckoning was drawing near. James's heart raced, the rich scent of coffee mixing with the tension still pulsing in his chest. As Clara put her phone down, he sensed a shift. The quiet cafe, once a bastion of warmth and reflection, brimmed with the reality of the outside world, and he felt an irresistible pull toward the door. Was he ready to step back into it, into the fray? "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her brow furrowed. She could see through the pretense. He took a deep breath, a familiar weight settling on his shoulders. "I'm just, thinking about what comes next. The moment I step out of here, I'll have to face everything I've been avoiding." "Like what?" "What's the first thing that comes to mind?" "Work. I haven't been back in a while," James admitted. In truth, his job at the design firm had felt more like a trap than a career, a symbol of all he didn't want to be. "I've been putting it off. What if they find out I'm not the same guy I used to be?" "You mean the version who played into the expectations of everyone around him?" Her words struck him as both piercing and illuminating. He had crafted a facade, appeasing the need for approval, delegating his personal essence to project an ideal, convenient, but ultimately empty. "Yes," he conceded. "Or maybe the version who was just comfortable being lost. That's the past, James. The real question is, who do you want to be at work? What would it look like to bring this clarity into that space?" Her eyes challenged him, laying bare the path he needed to confront. Imagining himself in that sterile office environment, his throat tightened. The thought of advising clients or collaborating with teammates felt daunting, a landmine where each step could expose his uncertainties. "I want to be authentic," he said finally, the words feeling like a shaky promise. "But authenticity doesn't always fit into a corporate mold. I want to contribute genuinely, but I fear being dismissed. I've seen how easily that happens." Clara considered this, then leaned back, arms crossed thoughtfully. So redefine what success looks like for you. It doesn't have to reflect past standards. What if you approached your work from a place of bravery? What if, instead of avoiding confrontation, you initiated it? The idea rippled through him, and a spark ignited in the depths of his mind. Could he advocate for innovation instead of mere compliance? Instead of suppressing his creative impulses, could he usher them into the boardroom? The real challenge lay not in the act of creativity, but in navigating the skepticism it often encountered. What if he presented ideas that challenged the status quo? His stomach churned with fear and exhilaration, a sign he may just be on the right track. "I think I can do that," he whispered, almost more to himself than to Clara. The thought had taken root, and suddenly, the prospect of failure felt less like an abyss and more like a stepping stone. "Great," she smiled, buoyantly optimistic. "But remember, the real failure is in not trying. Learning what you really want and need in that space is courageous. Stand by your ideas." The resolve blossoming inside him was abruptly jostled by the chime of the cafe door swinging open, the dangling bells heralding a new arrival. A man entered, large in stature, swaggering with an air of confidence that emanated from a lifetime of cozying up to success. James felt his heart quicken as recognition struck. He knew this man, a competitor from a rival firm, always a reminder of the perceived hierarchy that had loomed over his ambitions. In that instant, James felt the echo of his insecurities clawing back to life. How would he handle this confrontation? The ghosts of his uncertainty danced at the peripheries of his mind, and just as quickly, Clara's voice rang in his ears, anchoring him. "Remember, this is your crossroads, James. Be mindful of what you want." Could he turn this moment of unease into an opportunity? The stakes felt somehow higher, and as he squared his shoulders, determination surged through him. It was time to confront his fears, both in his career and within himself. As he approached the man, a new fire ignited in him. The possibility of transformation shimmered on the horizon. Could he truly face what lay ahead without the armor of self-doubt? The moment of truth was upon him, and with each step forward, James knew he was no longer that silent observer. Would he emerge victorious from this encounter, or would the lingering shadows pull him back? The moment James stood before his competitor, he felt the weight of every past hesitation pressing against him. But something inside him blazed with defiance. The man was impossibly self-assured, a constant in the cutthroat design landscape that James had subconsciously allowed to diminish his spirit. "James, right?" the man greeted, a smirk playing on his lips as he extended his hand. "I didn't expect to see you here. Having a little coffee break?" "Something like that," James replied, forcing a smile as he gripped the offered hand. His pulse thundered in his ears. This was the face of success he had always measured himself against, a living, breathing reminder of how far he felt from acceptance. Yet, as he looked into the man's eyes, searching for that familiar arrogance, he discovered something else. Vulnerability, woven within bravado. "Saw your last project. You've still got some vision in you, huh?" the man said, feigning a casual tone, but James could sense the underlying competitive current. "Thanks," he said, grasping at the string of validation. "I'm working on some new ideas." "New ideas?" the other scoffed lightly. "Good luck with that. Innovation's a tough sell." That flicker of skepticism nestled deep into his psyche, but James held his ground. Clara's words echoed in the back of his mind like a drumbeat of resolve. Maybe this was less about acceptance and more about assertion. "It's a risk worth taking," he countered, meeting the other man's eyes. "What's life without a little unpredictability?" The rival raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Spoken like a true dreamer. Most back off when they taste defeat, though." With each passing moment, the fog of self-doubt lifted, and clarity surged. This wasn't a battle to win against a better opponent. It was a chance for self-affirmation. James could feel the transformation swell within him, not just from this moment, but from the journey he had undertaken. "I think we need more dreamers in this industry, not less," he answered, the words surprisingly steady. "What's innovation if not the courage to reject the norm?" The rival looked taken aback, momentarily silent, as if grappling with a new perspective. James felt a flicker of triumph, a small victory in the midst of uncertainty. Just then, An unexpected wave of warmth washed over him. It wasn't the adrenaline from the confrontation that made him feel alive, but the realization that he was stepping into authenticity instead of retreating into his former version, the one clad in armor and riddled with a need for approval. This was transformation. On this day, he wasn't merely the shadow of that man. He could carve his path. "Interesting take," the competitor finally said, visibly attempting to regain his composure. "Let's see if you can actually present such ideas back at the firm." The challenge hung between them, tinged with provocation, but this time the prospect of tackling it sparked something deep within James. As the man turned away to greet others in the cafe, nostalgic thoughts swirled around James. Clara's steadfast encouragement and their conversation moments earlier illuminated the crux of his journey. This was no longer just about proving himself. It was about forging ahead with the authenticity he had begun to embrace. Nervous anticipation lingered as he took a seat once more, his hands wrapped around the warm cup of coffee. But the fears that had once clawed at his resolve had dulled into a whisper. Clarifying his vision required confronting this new persona, both in his work and with those he would lead. How could he further cultivate this resilience? His thoughts bounced like reflections in a hall of mirrors, unable to escape the question that now loomed larger than before. What new heights could he reach if he stopped relegating himself to the sidelines? He had the spark, but how would he stoke the flames of his new ambition? Deftly, he took out his notebook, resolute in organizing his ideas, channeling those past whispers into strategic thoughts that might be shared in the office. He was no longer that shell of a man. He was crafting a new narrative for himself. As he jotted down notes, a sense of purpose blossomed within him. But beneath that burgeoning confidence lay an undercurrent of fear. Fear of exposing himself fully to that creative environment, of facing dissent. The allure of failure whispered indelibly in the back of his mind. How could he motivate others to embrace change without falling prey to those doubts again? James closed his notebook, contemplating the next move. The outside world still loomed large, both a captivating frontier and an aversive shadow. With a deep breath, he recognized that he was still at the precipice of change. In the silence of the cafe, amidst the bustle of patrons and conversations, a new chapter was about to unfold. Would he fully commit to the authenticity he sought, or would the shadows of yesterday once again cloud his vision? He felt time pressing in around him. Choices were waiting, and clarity was only a step away. Could he embrace the unknown that lay ahead, or would he return to the familiar confines of self-doubt? The moment James stepped back into his office, the air thick with a familiar blend of stale coffee and printer ink, he understood the ambiance had once been a cloak, shrouding his insecurities rather than shielding him from them. Today, however, he resolved to breach that veil. Empowered by his recent encounter, he mentally steadied himself to navigate the labyrinth of cubicles and chatter, ready for a confrontation with his own potential. He was aware of the whispers behind him and the glances that turned sharply when he approached. The office had always thrived on a fine balance of rivalry and camaraderie, yet he felt the weight of both expectations and skepticism hanging high. Clara's words resonated within him. "Don't you ever cheat yourself of your potential." As he powered through the thrumming heart of the workplace, he knew that his very presence could disrupt the status quo. Reaching his desk, he took a moment to reclaim his breath and gather the notes he had drafted earlier. Concepts flowed through his mind, a torrent of creativity influenced by a desire to bridge the gap between conformity and innovation, a shift the firm desperately needed. But here lay deeper dilemmas. How could he introduce these radical ideas without being met with fierce resistance? James unceremoniously propped his notebook against the computer screen, thoughts racing. What if presenting his concepts sparked unrest rather than intrigue? He recalled the rival's cynical words, the monster of doubt whispering, "Will you be dismissed again?" Refusing to entertain that negativity, he decided to channel the tension. Perhaps it was time for a team meeting, an open forum where everyone could share ideas, worries, and aspirations. But with the memory of his past failures looming large, that notion paralyzed him. Would his colleagues brush aside his enthusiasm, as they had done before? It was this very fear that compelled him to act. He sent out a calendar invite for a team brainstorming session, clearly outlining the agenda. innovative concepts to revitalize our brand. It felt bold, almost reckless, but something stirred deep within him, a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. As he waited for the team to join, he reflected on his journey thus far, each step illuminating the depths of his resilience. It wasn't just the confidence he had found, it was recognizing what truly motivated him. Not success, but the act of creation itself, and the desire to inspire others. The pressure, the design, the strain of competition. He no longer viewed these as burdens, but as catalysts. Finally, the room began to fill. Faces he recognized from countless meetings filled the seats. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical, but none seemed dismissive, and that alone emboldened James. He stood as the last of his colleagues filed in, a silent breath catching in his throat as he forced a smile. "Thanks for coming, everyone," he began, attempting to steady his voice against the angular eyes watching him. "I wanted to open a discussion about new ideas that could potentially reshape our brand. Innovation is critical. We've all seen it in the industry." He met their gazes, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability by sharing what had inspired him. The hope of fostering an environment that doesn't merely celebrate conformity, but thrives on uniqueness. Slowly, he painted a picture of where he envisioned the company going, one where creativity was its lifeblood instead of its burden. As he spoke, he saw furrows of concentration deepen and eyebrows raise in intrigue. The shift in energy was palpable, a heartbeat pulsing in the room, and with every shared idea, faint inklings of support began warming the air. But then a familiar voice cut through with a challenge. "You really think we can just throw aside the success of the last campaign for this?" a colleague questioned, the undertone of doubt thick against the backdrop of newfound optimism. The confrontation forced him into a defensive position, and for a split second, uncertainty gripped him. But in that moment, the realization struck. This was precisely why change was necessary. How could he lead if he didn't confront these questions head-on? "Why not?" he shot back, fueled by an unexpected wave of conviction. What's success if we're living in a stagnant mold? If we can enhance our brand, why shouldn't we strive for something radical? A series of exchanges followed, a volley of concerns balanced with aspirations, some pushing back and others supporting him, but the dialogue birthed a collective energy, hungry for growth. He could feel the tense undercurrent shifting, transforming into a stream of possibilities where doubt was met with a spark of creativity. Each moment solidified James's resolve, thwarting the paralyzing fears of the past and binding him closer to this evolving narrative, a narrative that represented not just his growth but the potential evolution of the entire team. But as the ideas danced between them, a darker concern slinked into the back of his mind. What would happen when the inevitable pushback from higher-ups arrived? How would he handle resistance from the top, especially if his new ideas threatened the existing hierarchy? As James climaxed his pitch, adrenaline surged through him again, mingled with anxiety about looming obstacles. He realized the real journey had just begun. Would he have enough resolve to fight for his vision, when those he needed to convince were miles away from the ground he had started cultivating? The room buzzed with new energy, and James felt it. Something momentous was about to shift. But what price would he pay for this plunge into authenticity, and was he ready for the repercussions? The room fell into a tense silence as James's thoughts spiraled. He felt a blend of anticipation and dread. The words shared were no longer just ideas on paper, but his vulnerability exposed to scrutiny. His heart raced as he considered the consequences that might arise from disrupting the staid routines he had once been complicit in maintaining. He needed to stay grounded, to steer the conversation away from engagement fatigue toward constructive discourse. "I appreciate the skepticism, really. It means we're taking this seriously. Think of it as an opportunity to explore new avenues, rather than risk losing what we have." He paused, searching their faces for a sign of understanding. A sense of camaraderie began to cement. Afternoon coffee cups were shifting, new conversations sparked within the group like fireworks. "What if we looked at customer feedback as a foundation instead of an end?" a previously quiet colleague proposed, emboldened by the atmosphere of possibility. Understanding the gaps in their experience might lead us to something different entirely. Emboldened by their curiosity, he leaned in, Yes, let's use what our customers think. Let's embrace their narratives as part of our next steps. This shift in paradigm felt electric, a tether pulling him closer to a version of leadership he needed to embody, one that was both responsive and proactive. As the dialogue flowed, however, threads of hesitation began to tug at his confidence. Was this merely a momentary spark? What if the next meeting unveiled resistance from those steadfast in the old ways? A muted voice of doubt reminded him that change breeds dissent, often in the form of the very colleagues who once smiled in agreement. James's thoughts were interrupted by the chime signaling the conclusion of the meeting, an unwelcome push into reality. "Let's talk about this again next week," he said, eager to maintain momentum, yet mindful of the trepidation that lingered as discussions wrapped up. As people filtered out, he overheard snippets of conversation, a blend of excitement and hesitation. "He's too optimistic," one coworker remarked dismissively, echoing James's own fears. But another voice countered, "Isn't that the point? Maybe optimism can lead to real change." In that moment, he discovered something pivotal, a burgeoning sense of agency within the collective. Each perspective added layers to the conversation, clearing a path to not just acceptance, but empowerment. He was rising beyond the individual struggle and embracing the potential within the group dynamic. Days passed, yet James remained connected to those discussions, cultivating an internal dialogue that oscillated between hope and uncertainty. Reflecting on his core motivations, he realized he yearned not just for changes in approach, but essentially for acknowledgement as a leader. He was aware of his authority within the hierarchy, yet chose to reinvent his ambitions through authenticity rather than compliance. But as James began refining his thoughts for their next meeting, anxiety threaded itself into his ambitions. His vision might offend individuals who once claimed him as a peer, colleagues who had consistently secured their own positions based on traditional metrics of success. Would they stymie progress or reshape their narrative to accommodate innovation? His morning routine became a surrogate for this existential wrestling match. With every sip from his habitual coffee mug, visions of rejection intermingled with a flicker of bravery. Was the risk worth the potential fallout? Arriving early at the office, James implemented a new decision. Instead of merely seeking validation from others, he would ask what they truly needed from his leadership. His change in strategy felt momentous, but certainty eluded him. How could he redirect their focus from fear of failure to embracing the unknown? As the next meeting loomed, he wondered if they would trust him enough to follow his lead. Was this truly a transformative moment, or simply a fleeting glimpse of hope? Sitting at his desk, he daydreamed about generating innovative ideas that could ultimately redefine their dynamic. But beneath this daydream lay a more pressing question. If they were truly to innovate, how much could he afford to sacrifice personally? James braced himself. The moment of truth was indeed approaching, and with it the looming fear of judgment from both victor and vanquished. How would he face those who held the keys to his vision's realization? Would he find allies among the skeptics, or become an outcast in pursuit of something greater? The day of the meeting dawned, heavy with significance. James had refined his presentation, but the true crux lay in the words he would choose to speak. He paced his small office, rehearsing the flow of his ideas. Each iteration unveiled deeper layers of his anxiety about their reception. What if they deemed his proposals ungrounded, overly ambitious? The office buzzed with the sounds of keyboards clacking and muted conversations as he stepped into the main conference room, each sound amplifying his own heartbeat. The familiar faces settled around the table, a mixed bag of skepticism and curiosity hanging in the air. James took a deep breath, visualizing a collective nodding instead of a sea of frowns. "Thank you all for being here," he began, steadying himself. "Today I want us to envision our company not just as a provider of goods, but as a vital part of our customers' stories." He noticed a flicker of interest from a colleague who had previously displayed opposition. Encouraged, he continued, "Let's dissect the customer feedback further, instead of merely treating it as a box to tick. What if we transform these insights into actionable changes that would resonate with them emotionally?" As he spoke, he observed the shifts in body language, leaned-in elbows, furrowed brows. His colleagues were cautiously engaged, an exhilarating change from their previous apathy. In that moment, James realized he was not merely presenting ideas. He was weaving a narrative, a powerful story of potential. Despite the initial intrigue, however, the tides of doubt washed over him once more. What if they didn't fully grasp the implications of those stories? The customer's narratives can help us innovate in ways we can hardly imagine, he persisted, pushing through a well of uncertainty. Picture a collaboration where we no longer dictate terms, but instead listen and adapt based on their needs. The conversation tumbled back and forth like a tennis match, with hands raised and voices overlapping. Someone advocated for a focus on product features instead of customer engagement, voicing a challenge that cut through James like a cold wind. He sensed the struggle. The crux of their company culture was fear of change. Faced with resistance, James narrowed his focus. "I don't mean to disregard what has worked in the past," he countered, his patience intertwining with resolve. "But isn't it worth exploring how we can elevate our relationship with our customers? What could we lose by staying stagnant?" Silence enveloped the room. It was a pivotal moment. The confrontational energy shifted into contemplative introspection. Would they draw inspiration from his vision, or dip deeper into the comfort of the status quo? Then it happened. The woman from marketing spoke up. "You know, I've often felt that our customers are a forgotten voice. If we prioritize their experiences, we could actually create loyalty." James felt as though the air had ignited with her words. A spark had been struck, a collective understanding solidifying and shaping the discourse into an upward trajectory. Encouraged by this breakthrough, he leaned into this newfound momentum. But as lively conversations filled the room, doubt prickled again at the edge of his mind. While a cusp of progress built, his personal sacrifice loomed larger. Was he risking his social capital by challenging the unwavering norms? James's gaze drifted across the room, landing on familiar faces, some now animated with curiosity, others still running the old scripts. He realized he had entered uncharted territory. Connections were forming amidst the shifting dynamic. Yet, the question remained. Could the currents of innovation carry through the stormy waters of skepticism? As the meeting drew toward a close, James took one last calculated risk. "Let's not dissect the idea of integrating customer feedback just yet, but rather gather stories from our customers for the next week. I want us to dive deep into their experiences." He was met with a chorus of mixed reactions, some supporters, some naysayers. The ground had shifted, but the landscape remained uneven. Could he truly spearhead this evolution within the company? With the meeting adjourned, doubt returned like a looming shadow. Progress felt within reach, yet James knew the journey ahead would require more than momentary sparks. It would demand relentless fortitude and the courage to face inevitable pushbacks. He left the room with a renewed sense of purpose, but could not ignore what lay beyond his immediate success. Was his personal investment too high, and at what point would the facade of innovation shatter under pressure? As he stepped into the corridor, ideas buzzing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was just beginning. Would he have the strength to continue cultivating these seeds of change as they confronted their roots? In the days that followed, James harnessed an unwavering resolve to initiate the innovative shift he believed was necessary. The initial reactions from his colleagues had been mixed, but he recognized momentum when he saw it. A spark had been ignited. By introducing the notion of collecting customer stories, he had unlocked a dialogue once stifled by the weight of conformity. This new path wouldn't just reignite the team's creativity, it had the potential to restore his confidence and redefine his place in the office. Each morning, he arrived earlier at work, rejuvenated by the relationships he was beginning to forge. Clara's unswerving belief in him resonated, echoing in the corners of his mind as he navigated through brainstorming sessions and collaborative efforts. Drawing from the stories shared during their exchanges, he channeled passion into fostering an environment where innovation flowed freely, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. James organized informal team sessions where everyone could bring their puzzle pieces, ideas, fears, dreams, into the fold. Each meeting brought forth energy. The kind of enthusiasm he had once feared was locked away behind the corporate facade. Slowly but surely, conversations transformed. The office buzzed with a palpable sense of reimagined purpose. Ideas that once felt insurmountable began to take shape, bolstered by diverse perspectives, a vivid tapestry of collaboration woven from the narratives they had unearthed. By the time the official presentation to upper management drew near, he had amassed a portfolio overflowing with insights from customers who had become more than moving statistics. They were vital stories that needed to be told. However, with this growing excitement came the undercurrent of anxiety. The old specter of doubt clawed at him, whispering fears of rejection and backpedaling into the shadows. Still, James steeled himself. He consciously acknowledged the lessons learned. He was no longer merely an observer, but an architect of this vision. Standing before the board that day, papers crisp in his hands, he exuded a newfound authority. "The customer is not just a number," he began, his voice carried by a confidence stemming from authentic connection, "but a living narrative that can teach us how to thrive." As he presented, he saw flickers of recognition among some members of the board, their eyes tinged with curiosity rather than disdain. Each slide illustrated the value of weaving customer experiences into their brand ethos, framing the conversation in a manner that transcended the fear of loss. He felt it. He was no longer battling against the norms. He was proposing a vision grounded in deep, meaningful engagement. The resistance he had once braced for dulled against the power of shared stories and collective inspiration. At the conclusion of the meeting, the board members exchanged glances, the collective uncertainty now mingling with intrigue. James heard words of encouragement ripple through the room. He was met not with silence, but with candid discussions about taking their first steps towards incorporating the customer narratives into their process. Days later, the approval arrived in a crisp email, complete with a green light to implement the proposed initiative. As James read through the response, his heart surged with exhilaration, not merely because of the acceptance, but because of the foundation they were prepared to build together. Internal resistance was dissolving before his eyes. The shift he had envisioned was no longer dormant. A few weeks later, James hosted the initial learning session, inviting customers to share their stories firsthand. Voices that had been silent now resonating through the walls he had once feared. He observed them connecting with the employees, witnessing the raw power of presence and engagement, the touchstone of progress fulfilling the promise he had envisioned. With each story shared, James felt himself anchored, an inner strength building. This was beyond just a project. This was about evolving as a team and as individuals. Clara's influence had permeated throughout, reminding him of the juxtaposition he had embraced, the lesson of grounding authenticity within professional aspirations. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere buzzed with collaborative energy. Colleagues who had once been skeptical now approached him with ideas, building on the foundation laid. The rhythm of innovation began to resonate. Together, they crafted products that mirrored the aspirations and desires of their customers, redefining their market presence. His journey had come full circle. James had transcended the boundaries of his previous self. No longer did he seek validation or dwell on doubts. Instead, he stood tall, confident, creative, committed. The weight of superficial success felt like a distant echo. He was now anchored by the richness of authentic connection and genuine leadership. The recognition culminated at their quarterly company event, where James was awarded the Innovator of the Year, an honorable accolade acknowledging not just his courage to envision change, but the collaborative movement he had instigated. As he accepted the award, he scanned the room, absorbing the palpable pride from his colleagues, the warmth emanating more than mere applause. Yet it wasn't about the trophy. It was in Clara's supportive smile from the crowd, and within the new spirit woven through the fabric of their workplace. He realized this moment embodied more than personal victory. It was testament to the transformation born from resilience, introspection, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability. In that exhilarating moment, James felt an unbreakable thread connecting past to future, a journey anchored in hope and driven by the power of shared stories, reflecting his newfound purpose. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that true success was never measured merely by wealth. It was anchored in the lives touched, perspectives enriched, and a community built through the vibrant exchange of authentic narratives that would continue to shape their world. As he stepped off the stage, he made a silent vow to carry this lesson forward, to nurture and advocate for an environment where innovation thrived through courage and genuine connection, where every voice mattered. And with that resolve, a life transformed, one that would continually strive toward purpose, vulnerability, and authentic fulfillment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.